Hello and welcome to Nobody Immune series of Warcraft history, where we discuss the lore of the Warcraft universe and the edited lore that was changed for the World of Warcraft game by Blizzard. In my previous video, we have covered the issues revolving around the Great Sundering, its various accounts, and theories as to its cause. Ultimately, we discovered that it is generally accepted and believed that its cause was due to an unstable vortex within the well itself, as Sargeras was attempting to cross into the world of Azeroth, and the portal began its process of crumbling in within itself. While simultaneously Queen Ashara dueled with the powerful young druid Malfurion Stormridge. The vast flows of magic caused the vortex within the well to give out and began the process of its implosion. Today we continue forward with events that follow immediately after the Great Sundering, the creation of the second well, or the founding of the new well of eternity. Again, just like the War of the Ancients and the Sundering, the creation of the second well of eternity has many different versions or accounts. They are the Warcraft 3 account, the RPG account, the World of Warcraft account, and the War of the Ancients trilogy account. Depending on the version read, the second well may have been more powerful and plentiful than the previous account of its creation. This was due to the amount of vials poured into the lake at Hyjal by Illidan Stormridge. Depending on the version, Illidan may have poured a few vials or several vials into the lake, thus creating a far more powerful and magical cosmic well of eternity. So let's begin. The few night elves that survived the horrific explosion rallied together on crudely made rafts and slowly made their way to the only landmass in sight. Somehow, by the grace of Elune, Malfurion, Tyrande, and Cenarius had survived the Great Sundering. The weary heroes agreed to lead their fellow survivors and established a new home for their people. As they journeyed in silence, they surveyed the wreckage of their world and realized that their passions had wrought the destruction all around them. Though Sargeras and his legion had been ripped from the world by the well's destruction, Malfurion and his companions were left to ponder the terrible cost of victory. There were many highborn who did survive the cataclysm unscathed. They made their way to the shores of the new land along with the other night elves. Though Malfurion mistrusted the highborn's motivations, he was satisfied that they could cause no real mischief without the well's energies. As the weary mass of night elves landed upon the shores of the new land, they found that the holy mountain, Hyjal, had survived the catastrophe. Seeking to establish a new home for themselves, Malfurion and the Night Elves climbed to the slopes of Hyjal and reached its wind-swept summit. As they descended into the wooded bowl, nestled between the mountain's enormous peaks, they found a small, tranquil lake. To their horror, they found that the lake's waters had been fouled by magic. Illidan, having survived the Sundering as well, had reached Hyjal's summit long before Malfurion and the Night Elves. In his mad bid to maintain the flows of magic in the world, Illidan had poured his vials, which contained the precious waters from the Well of Eternity, into the mountain lake. The well's potent energies quickly ignited and coalesced into a new Well of Eternity. The exultant Illidan, believing that the new well was a gift to future generations, was shocked when Malfurion hunted him down. Malfurion explained to his brother that magic was innately chaotic and that its use would inevitably lead to widespread corruption and strife. Still, Illidan refused to relinquish his magical powers. Knowing full well where Illidan's ruthless schemes would eventually lead, Malfurion decided to deal with his power-crazed brother once and for all. With Cenarius' help, Malfurion sealed Illidan within a vast underground barrel prison where he would remain chained and powerless until the end of time. To ensure his brother's containment, Malfurion empowered the young warden, Maeve Shadowsong, to be Illidan's personal jailer. Concerned that destroying the new well might bring about an even greater catastrophe, the Night Elves resolved to leave it be. However, Malfurion declared that they would never practice the arts of magic again. Under Cenarius' watchful eye, they began to study the ancient arts of Judaism that would enable them to heal the ravaged earth and regrow their beloved forests at the base of Mount Hyjal. That passage can be found in the History of Warcraft, Chapter 1, under Mount Hyjal and Illidan's Gift, and it occurred approximately 9,999 through 9,998 years prior to the opening of the Dark Portal. This next passage can be found in the Warcraft RPG, page 22, under The Sundering of the World. The Night Elves climbed the slopes of Hyjal to the wooded bowl nestled between the mountain's enormous peaks. A small, tranquil lake awaited them, but to their horror, the lake's waters were fouled by magic. Malfurion did not know at the time, but Illidan was present at the fight against the Highborn. He hid in the shadows, taking advantage of the confusion of battle to fill 7 vials with the well's shimmering waters. Having survived the sundering, Illidan fled to Mount Hyjal and poured one of the vial's contents into the mountain lake. The well's potent energies quickly ignited and coalesced into a new well of eternity. Illidan intended it as a gift to future generations, but Malfurion was outraged. Arcane power was innately chaotic, and use of the well's energies would lead to a repeat of the horrors just endured by the Night Elves. Illidan denied his brother's accusations and refused to relinquish his magical powers. With Cenarius' help, Malfurion sealed his own brother within a vast underground chamber. The well was not so easily handled. Fearing that its destruction would unleash another catastrophe, the Night Elves looked for a way to protect it. This final passage can be found within the Warcraft 3 manual under Night Elves, the Sentinels, Night Elf History, Mount Hyjal, and Illidan's Gift. As the aftershocks from the well's implosion rattled the bones of the world, the seas rushed in to fill the gaping wound left in the earth. Nearly 80% of Kalimdor's landmass had been blasted apart, leaving only a handful of separate continents surrounding the new, raging sea. At the center of the new sea, where the Well of Eternity once stood, was a tumultuous storm of tidal fury and chaotic energies. This terrible scar, known as the Maelstrom, would never cease its furious spinning. It would remain a constant reminder of the terrible catastrophe and the utopian era that had been lost forever. The few Night Elves that survived the horrific explosion rallied together on crudely made rafts and slowly made their way to the only landmass in sight. Somehow, by the grace of Elune, Furion, Tyrande, and Cenarius had survived the Great Sundering. The weary heroes agreed to lead their fellow survivors and establish a new home for their people. As they journeyed in silence, they surveyed the wreckage of their world and realized that their passions had wrought the destruction all around them. Though Sargeras and his legion had been ripped from the world by the well's destruction, Furion and his companions were left to ponder the terrible cost of victory. It was clear that Ashara and her elite highborn followers had been smashed to the bottom of the raging sea. Still, there were many highborn amongst the survivors who made their way to the shores of the new land. Though Firion mistrusted the Highborn's motivations, he was satisfied that they could cause no real mischief without the well's energies. As the weary mass of night elves landed upon the shores of the new land, they found that the holy mountain, Hyjal, had survived the catastrophe. Seeking to establish a new home for themselves, Firion and the night elves climbed the slopes of Hyjal and reached its wind-swept summit. As they descended into the wooded bow nestled between the mountain's enormous peaks, they found a small, tranquil lake. To their horror, they found the lake's waters had been fouled by magic. Illidan, having survived the sundering as well, had reached Hyjal's summit long before Firion and the Night Elves. In his mad bid to maintain the flows of magic in the world, Illidan had poured his vials, containing the precious waters from the Well of Eternity, into the mountain lake. The well's potent energies quickly ignited and coalesced into a new Well of Eternity. The exultant Illidan, believing that the new well was a gift to future generations, was shocked when Firion hunted him down. Firion explained to his brother that magic was innately chaotic and that its use would inevitably lead to widespread corruption and strife. Still, Illidan refused to relinquish his magical powers. Knowing full well where Illidan's treacherous schemes would eventually lead, Firion decided to deal with his power-crazed brother once and for all. With Cenarius' help, Firion sealed Illidan within a vast underground chamber to remain chained and powerless until the end of time. Concerned that destroying the new well might bring about an even greater catastrophe, the Night Elves resolved to leave it be. However, Firion declared that they would never practice the arts of magic again. Under Cenarius' watchful eye, they began to study the ancient arts of Judaism that would enable them to heal the ravaged earth and regrow their beloved forests at the base of Mount Hyjal. Interestingly enough, this chapter in the Warcraft universe is often overlooked by many and is primarily disregarded amongst fans, who seem to believe the event itself is really irrelevant, when in fact it happens to be one of the most, if not the most, important event in the entire history of the world of Azeroth, as it would ensue the continuation of the Burning Legion's interest in the world, and nearly all future events would be due to some relevance to the Second Well of Eternity. If not for Illidan's actions, then in truth it could be argued that the Legion would have lost any and all interest in the world, unless they wanted to re-enter it just for the sake of vengeance. Thus, there would have been no invasion of the Horde, no First War, no Second War, no Scourge, no Lich King, or Third War. There would never have been a climatic battle of Mount Hyjal, and the entire history of Warcraft would have been either different or non-existent. Depending on the version read, the amount of vials Illidan poured into the lake varies, as well as his motivations behind his actions, and the details of his arrest. In the Warcraft 3 account, Illidan managed to pour an unknown amount of vials of the well's cosmic waters into the lake at Hyjal, before being confronted by his brother Malfurion. It simply states that he poured his vials, so it is believed he poured all of them into the lake. Illidan had desired to present the well as a gift for future generations, as it plainly states, as well as to satiate his own thirst for arcane magic. However, at some point, Illidan fled from his brother, whom hunted Illidan down throughout the Night Elf realm, with Cenarius' help, and imprisoned him far beneath the earth in the Barrow's deeps. The Night Elves, barely having survived the Great Sundering, feared the Second Well's destruction would bring more calamity and devastation to them if it was destroyed, and thus they opted to leave the well be. However, according to the RPG, Illidan managed to pour only one of his vials into the lake at Hyjal, before being immediately arrested by his brother. The two brothers argued over Illidan's actions, and Malfurion sealed him away with Cenarius' assistance under the earth. Afterwards, Malfurion banned the use of magic from Night Elf society and reformed their civilization. The Night Elves' roles would become extremely gender based and sexist, with only males being druids or allowed to be druids, and females becoming sentinels, watchers, or priestesses. In the RPG, the Night Elves feared the well completely, not just for the fact that the demons would return to claim it, but for the corruption that the arcane powers brought forth to their kind. The Night Elves, one could assume, panicked, as they looked for a way to somehow hide or contain the well's cosmic powers within the lake at Hyjal. Eventually, they would find the answers lied with the aspects. According to the War of the Ancients trilogy by Richard A. Knack, though, Illidan was motivated to create the new Well of Eternity, not only to satiate his own thirst for magic and to be his gift for future generations, but also out of fear. Illidan believed the demons would return for vengeance, and he believed the Night Elves would need the well to defeat them. Ironically, his actions guaranteed the Legion's return rather than prevent it or thwart it. In the War of the Ancients trilogy account, Illidan managed to pour not just one, but 3 vials of the well's waters into the lake, creating a much more powerful well of eternity than the previous account just mentioned. Illidan was soon spotted by Maeve Shadowsong's own brother, Jared Shadowsong, and his companions, not Malfurion, as the previous accounts claim. Jared was also the reluctant leader of the Night Elf peoples in the War of the Ancients trilogy, not Malfurion, and would maintain this position until an unknown time the trilogy never specified. Jared and his men attempted to stop Illidan, and a skirmish ensued, whereupon Illidan killed some of Jared's men and wounded Jared grievously as well. Illidan would not be stopped until Malfurion arrived and subdued his brother with his Druidic magic. Malfurion immobilized Illidan, who was then attacked by an enraged Maeve Shadowsong, who attempted to kill him out of vengeance. However, with Tyronda's help, Malfurion was able to hold her back. Illidan would later be held on trial and be accused of various crimes. He objected to them and claimed he was taking the necessary precautions to stop the return of the demons in the future, citing all he had done for his people during the war and that he had never betrayed them. However, none came to his defense, nor believed him. Jared and the majority of the survivors pushed to execute Illidan, but Malfurion suggested imprisonment instead. Though at first, Maeve and Jared argued against Malfurion, Jared finally accepted the terms. Maeve, whom was enraged that Illidan would not be executed, demanded to be his jailer. Malfurion was so impressed by her zeal and determination, he granted Maeve the title of Warden. Maeve, who was originally a priestess of Elune, left the order and became the leader of the Watchers. However, according to the World of Warcraft account, the general consensus is that Illidan poured an unknown amount of vials into the lake at Hyjal, and was motivated by the desire to feed his arcane addiction and satiate his thirst for magic. Illidan was shocked when his brother and people rejected his actions, and was cast out, having disagreed with his brother and his ideals. He would be forced into hiding, and lived on the run for some time. Malfurion then was forced to hunt Illidan down throughout the Night Elf realm for an unknown amount of time, with the assistance of Maeve Shadowsong. Illidan, being a demon hunter, was an incredibly difficult and agile foe to hunt down, forcing Malfurion to seek out Cenarius to help him find his brother, and both of them used their Druidic powers of nature to help locate and trap him. Cenarius and Malfurion imprisoned Illidan deep beneath the Barrow's deeps. Malfurion would also charge Maeve Shadowsong to be Illidan's warden and watcher. Malfurion was so impressed by Maeve's zeal and determination that he not only granted her the position, but the authority as well, to be the leader of the Watchers and the Wardens. However, unlike the War of the Ancients trilogy account, Maeve was never a priestess of Elune, but she already was a Watcher. But she would become the first of the Wardens, and the leader of the organization of the Watchers. What I find most important about this event, is the amount of vials that Illidan poured into the lake at Hyjal. The various accounts give various estimates, but if the amount of vials used differ, then in theory the power and magical energies within the lake at Hyjal must vary as well. For instance, if Illidan poured only one vial into the lake at Hyjal in the RPG, then in theory that lake's magical flow and energy would be less and weaker than the lake in the War of the Ancients trilogy account, as Illidan poured 3 vials into it. I also find it interesting that the motivations behind Illidan's actions differ, showing us different sides of his character as well as his attributes. We are first shown an Illidan who is greedy, mischievous, somewhat uncaring of others, and power-hungry. However, we later on see Illidan as a more evil, villainous individual who is obsessed with gaining more power and feeding his own magical addiction. Whereas later on we see a more sympathetic person who was concerned for the well-being of his people, worried about the future, and terrified that the demons would return. Finally, though, all of these attributes and traits are given to Illidan in the finalization of the World of Warcraft continuation, giving his character a very mysterious, shadowy, and misunderstood personality and history. Ultimately, this event continues to be one of the most important chapters within the world. It guaranteed the Burning Legion's interest in the world of Azeroth, it created the Second Well of Eternity, and ensued the creation of Nordrassil. It caused the banishment of the Demon Hunters, as well as their practices. It helped motivate the Caldori to reform their society, and caused the Caldori to forsake their use of arcane magic and turn to the Druidic arts of the wilds. It also would be followed by the gender-based roles and sexist class structures for both males and females of the Caldori race, as well as lead up to the aspects blessing the Caldori people and the World Tree. These are just several examples that revolve around this event in this chapter of the Warcraft universe. The importance of this chapter and the events immediately surrounding it cannot be stressed enough nor overestimated. This single act would have disastrous consequences in the entire world for thousands of years to come. And that's it for today. This concludes the creation of the Second Well of Eternity. Thank you for watching today's episode. If you want to see more episodes and comparisons, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to message me. Also, don't forget about our Facebook page that is up and running. The link to that is in the About box. Until next time, I will see you on the next episode.